This is Tyrese Haliburton, and you're listening to Setting the
The
Pace.
Indiana Pacers visit the Dallas Mavericks and they beat them 134-127 on the road. And this was probably the best played game by the Pacers from start to finish. Yes, start to finish, not the best result, maybe, but you love seeing how they just took care of the team that was just in the NBA Finals, the Dallas Mavericks. Luka Doncic, potential MVP candidate, Kyrie Irving shooting 59% from three entering the game. So this was a tough matchup, and the Pacers were shorthanded. No Aaron Nesmith. Obviously, the news to Isaiah Jackson. Still don't have James Wiseman, obviously, with his Achilles. So Pacers backs up against the wall a little bit, but they've had 2 days off. And my oh my, do they need it because they came out playing fresh, Fudge.
They really did. They led 15-2 to start the game. That's everything you wanted to see from this team. How are they going to respond against, the reigning Western Conference champs in the Dallas Mavericks? I felt like Indiana had been let down by the performance against New Orleans. They didn't take Dallas for granted tonight. It was great to see them get out to that hot start in classic fashion. Obviously, Dallas would make a run back, but I would say for the most part, Indiana was in control for the majority of this game, as I don't believe Dallas ever led by more than 2 points in this game.
No, they didn't. And it's crazy because we've talked about this on this show. Like, hey, if the Pacers make their shots, they look like a different team. They shot 40.6% from three, 56.8% from the field.
Season high.
And what'd you say?
A season high.
Yeah.
56.8.
And they just look like a different team. But I almost tweeted it out, but I didn't tweet it out because I was like, I'll just save it for the podcast. But it's like, oh my gosh, when Myles Turner and Tyrese Haliburton play like they're the top three players on this team, the Pacers look like a different team. But Myles Turner, once again, he might want to change his name to Dallas because whenever Myles Turner is in Dallas, this guy just goes off. This is his first ever 30-point game in Dallas, but still, he was fantastic in this game. 30 points and 11 rebounds. How often are we talking about Turner with double-digit rebounds? Looks like a different player. I have to ask you, is it because he's in Dallas or is it because of the bigs that Dallas has had over the years that the matchup is just more favorable?
I honestly believe he gets up for the game in Dallas a lot more. I know you mentioned his first 30-point performance in Dallas. That's his third overall against Dallas. I felt like it always means more to him. You and I made a comment before this game. Hey, Turner playing Dallas, like probably going to put on a show, and he did.
Yep.
And this is the Myles Turner. This is why, to be honest, we were so hard on him last episode because he's capable of so much more. You see this Myles, and you're like, this is everything the Pacers need. When Turner's playing, he doesn't need to have put up 30 and 11. He doesn't need to do that. But 20 and 7. Could you do something along those lines? Because when you do, the Pacers look like a dangerous team, and Myles had it going immediately. He had 11 points in the first quarter. He set the tone early on.
No, and I think it was smart for the Pacers to continue to go to him, right? Like we've talked about this, and I know this season a lot. We've seen Myles try to go for that hammer dunk and get himself going, and he's not done very well at that. But he had one on Luka Doncic. The Mavericks early on in the first quarter challenge it, try to get the offensive foul on Turner, which would have been huge, honestly. Like if they get an extra foul on Myles, like could that change his mindset a little bit? Because the last thing you want with only having one center is to get your guy in foul trouble, especially on offensive fouls, whether it's moving screens or, just getting out of position, trying to fight for a rebound just on the offensive glass and not making a good decision. But I think this was a great, boost for Myles Turner to get those dunks that he had. Got fouled on another dunk attempt, and it's like he was playing with so much more force and energy that we haven't seen. So whatever he does to get up for Dallas games, hey, take that with you for the next couple of weeks, okay? Let's see what you can do over a 3 to 4 week span because the Pacers need Myles Turner to be really good for them to be the best version of themselves, right? Like this is what's so frustrating about Turner is you see games like this, but you don't see it consistently. And that's what I think we're asking for is more consistency. Like you said, 20 and 7 would be a breath of fresh air, but what is he averaging around 14 points a game, 16 points a game?
Yeah. Coming into this game, he was averaging about 14 and a half and just under 6 rebounds.
Yeah. And it's just like, okay, that's a role player's numbers, right? So it's just like you get twice that production, like you just said, and it's a totally different player. So I told you, I said, look, I came into the last episode that we did celebrating our 1000th episode, and I said, look, Myles Turner has been basically a minus 54 on the court since the game against Detroit. The Pacers have yet to win And I said, of course, when I say all this, he's going to come out and have a good game against Dallas. I just knew. As soon as I start to dive into how bad he's played, he's a +9 in this game. So now, no longer a -54, just a -45.
Hey, look, progress. But look, here's the thing. Turner had 7 made threes coming into this game. He had 5 tonight. 5 made threes. It's like the 3-point shot had not been hitting like in years past. And I think this was an awesome, confidence type of performance, just like you said. And I think that this is, I didn't want to get ahead of myself. You and I, we were texting earlier, and I was like, man, if we can beat Dallas, all of a sudden you look at the rest of the schedule. It's the Magic with no Paulo. It's the Charlotte Hornets. Like, we can go on a run now. And I feel that way. One game can change a lot. It's late. I'm feeling good. There was going to be a moment where if the Pacers blew this and I was exhausted, I would have been like, man, this is a real big commitment. But nights like tonight just show you this team is capable of way more. You mentioned it. I think that this is their best performance. I know they beat Boston. It took overtime in order to do that. But you saw 134. That felt like Pacer basketball. Even if you were letting up 127, it still just felt like a return to what we saw last year. 7 Pacers scoring in double figures. That's what we had that the rest of the league didn't have last year. It was the depth. And I felt that even though, like you said earlier, no Aaron Nesmith, no Isaiah Jackson, they found ways to get contributions from everybody. And, man, it felt good to get Rick a win in Dallas against the Mavericks.
Yeah, another win in Dallas for Rick Carlisle. I mean, it's crazy the Pacers have won 3 games now in a row against the Mavericks. A team that everybody thinks is one of the best in the league. So let's move on, though, from Myles Turner to another guy that had probably his best game of the season, Tyrese Haliburton. Tyrese Haliburton plays 36 minutes. He goes 10 of 16 from the field, 25 points. He still shot just 25% from 3, but he only took 8 3-point attempts out of his 16 shots. So you're seeing more 2s. But what I loved about this, Facci, is the fact that he was getting inside the arc and really putting pressure on Dallas, driving to the basket, pulling up a little bit in the mid-range game, ends up having 8 of his makes from 2, which is just a breath of fresh air because there are so many more elements of Tyrese Haliburton's game that we haven't seen. You saw him kind of get that joy back, screaming into the air a little bit. He even took a 3 where he was feeling hot, and I said, oh, if he gets this, we might see Tyrese Haliburton skipping down the court. Like, it was right there. And so I just keep going back to what Zach Lowe said after the Orlando loss last Monday, that the Haliburton eruption is coming. But 25 and 12, this was the perfect night for Haliburton to kind of get himself back on track. I loved everything about the way he played in this game tonight. And I even will say this, his defense is really starting to pick up for what he's asked to do.
I completely think so. I mean, he has to buy in on that side, but and he has. But it's great to see it, pay off. But from an offensive standpoint, like that was our beef with Tyrese and all. Settling for too many threes. And you talked about when he was able to get in the paint, having that floater going, being able to find other teammates, being able to get to the free throw line, just being able to just like have those layups before that. We really haven't seen much of this year. It was so great to see. It felt like that was our Tyrese. It felt like the Tyrese Haliburton of early last season. 10 of 16 from the field, 25 and 12. It just felt like it had been so long since he had that type of performance. And he needed it because I felt like it was mentally wearing on him. You started to see what felt like any type of, outlet on social media, whatever it is, taking shots at Tyrese. Great to pick up this type of win in Dallas on the road and get your mojo back, it felt like. And now I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrese is really able to build off of this type of performance and know that, yeah, I got to get in the lane more because good things happen when I'm not settling for so many threes. And there's no way to not be incredibly encouraged by this type of performance. 12 assists to just 2 turnovers all across the board. It felt like vintage Tyrese.
Yeah, it did. I mean, you probably just want to see the 3-point percentage a little bit higher.
Of course.
And that makes you feel better, right? That would make you feel like, okay, this is vintage Tyrese. Yes. But he's getting a lot of talk. Like every podcast I'm listening to that's national coverage, right? They're like, man, Tyrese Haliburton, he's not playing well. Tyrese Haliburton this, Tyrese Haliburton that. And it's true. He hasn't played well. We've talked about it on this podcast. He is deserved of the criticism that he's getting, right? But he's responding. And I think that people kind of forget that this is a guy that responds well and doesn't let things carry on for too long. And that's what you love about his game. Now, Facci, I do want to talk quickly about the depth of this roster right now because they are short, they're shorthanded and they've got some younger guys playing some bigger minutes. But don't you just love the fact that in this 9-man rotation, 7 Pacer players got into double figures? This is what we talked about last year. I forget what the stat was, but there at one point, you had a running stat line going of when the Pacers had 7 or more in double figures, they were like 12-0 for a long time. Like it just kept building up and building up, and it feels like this is the best version of the Pacers when they have multiple guys in scoring, double figure scoring.
It really is. I mean, this is our strength. Like, it's like, no, we don't have like I don't know, like the Anthony Edwards type of players that can just go off any night and get you, 30 to 40. But I felt like the Pacers have depth, and it showed that even like I mentioned, even without an Aaron Nesmith, even without an Isaiah Jackson, they have guys that just contribute very well. Like on a night like tonight where Ben Shepherd was quiet, at any given point he could do what he did last game, maybe, drop 20 against New Orleans. Like not something to expect, but Jarris Walker, not giving you as much contributions as you want. But when you're going across the board, it's like your Obi Toppins, you have to count on them. Your TJ McConnells, you have to count on him. I believe that was his 5th game in double figures this year. Mathurin in the starting lineup at times, a little bit quiet. Then you see in the fourth quarter, really stepped up, hit some big baskets. He was the 7th Pacer to finally be able to get in double figures. We talked about Haliburton already. Nembhard just cool and calm, like you needed him back. And Turner, we shined upon. And then, Siakam. Obviously, Siakam is someone you have to count on. The Pacers, their depth is pretty much unmatched across the board. You know what you're going to get out of Luka Doncic for the Mavericks. Like, you can expect just about 30 points every given night. Kyrie, he's going to be big. But after that, then you start to wonder, okay, who's your third guy going to be for Indiana? It's like a revolving door. Sometimes it is Turner. Sometimes it could be Mathurin. But across the board, you have 7 guys that you really got to be focused on any given night with this team. And those 7 very much stepped up tonight.
Yeah, it was great to see, and I'm gonna throw this out at you because we talked about it on the last episode, not the last episode, but the recap episode that we just did, and I was really disappointed with the Pacers' big 3. Right, they scored 39 points against the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Pelicans didn't even have a big 3. Yeah. If they want to include their big 3, you throw Jordan Hawkins in there, who should not be a part of their big 3. He's like 9th or 10th man with their normal rotation. But tonight, the Pacers' big 3 against Dallas scored 78 points. And that is the difference. When your stars come to play, I said it at the beginning, but I wanted to give some context here. 78 points carrying the load, that's massive. Like, that's what you need. So it's really important. Maybe I'm off on my math, but I think 78 is
No,
right.
You're right. You're correct. I double-checked.
Okay. So almost 80 points of their 134. So that's a big chunk. And the rest of the guys did their roles and filled in. Like, this is the recipe for success. I'm not expecting the Pacers to sustain that over the 82-game season, right? But I do think that they can do this more often. You're going to start seeing more wins happen. And there's going to be nights when guys pop off like Ben Shepherd, like Ben Mathurin did against the Celtics, like we've seen Andrew Nembhard do before, and Aaron Nesmith. So, there's going to be times when those guys have the hot hand going, but you just need to have more production from the guys you're paying the most. And that's why I love to see it. But I think Pascal Siakam, I mean, honestly, if you look at the box score, you're like, man, this guy had a great game. But when you were watching it, it probably didn't feel like he had that, dominating of a game, because it just kind of happened steadily throughout the entirety of the game, where he would put in a couple points here, a couple points there, but it wasn't like he went on this, massive tear of dropping, 8 points in a row. It was just slowly getting to that 23-point mark. I thought he was actually fantastic in this game. And once again, Facci, best plus minus on the team for Siakam in those 36 minutes, the Pacers were plus 16.
I mean, I believe it. I think when the Pacers go through Siakam consistently, good things happen. I talked about Turner got the Pacers off to a great start with 11 in the first quarter. It was Siakam that had 9 as well. He got off to a good start. And just like you said, slow and steady, just a couple baskets here and there throughout the game, just remains consistent. I think for Siakam, it's very important that they, get him going. And I think that this season, he's been pretty quietly really good. I mean, I think before, maybe it was either coming into New Orleans or just after that, he had been rated one of the better players in the league right now in terms of just like he's been very efficient thus far in the season. Coming into this game, he's averaging about 20 points per game, about 55% from the field, 45% from three.
Yeah.
I felt like he's just been, even from an assist standpoint, averaging over 5 assists. I mean, he has just been quietly very good for the Pacers. They haven't had to force feed him the ball. He's just been efficient with it. But a couple other stats that I just wanted to run through because when we talk about a complete game, Indiana from from 3-point land, 40% from three, love it. But also points in the paint, 76 points. They outscored Dallas by 18 in the paint. I just felt like across the board, this was just such a well balanced effort for Indiana, and I feel like it is easy to overlook a guy like Siakam in this type of game where it felt like just about everybody produced.
Yeah, I will say this. Like I was looking at Dallas, like they didn't have Maxi Kleber tonight, and Derek Lively didn't play. So Dwight Powell, who we just talked about as a guy the Pacers could trade for, he played, did not do super great in the minutes he was out there in the with the second unit. Najee Marshall, though, I thought he was really impactful in this game. And Jason Kidd decided in the second half to start Najee Marshall and bring Daniel Gafford off the bench. I thought that was an interesting move. They kind of went small ball with PJ Washington at the 5. And there was times where they were able to get their offense going, and I think that did help them a little bit by making that decision. But I think it's really interesting when a team is playing such a unique style in terms of Indiana that the coach has to go back and change the starting lineup,
Love
you
it.
know, at half. I mean, just to make a halftime adjustment because they were trying to get things, switched up on Indiana. And I think that Myles Turner was having his way with Daniel Gafford. And that's why I was asking about the matchup earlier, just because I feel like Gafford is a guy that, has had his moments against Turner as well. But I mean, Turner had some big moments against him when he was in Washington. If you remember that massive game that he had 2 or 3 years ago when he ended up, I think it was before they traded for Haliburton. They still had Sabonis on the roster, but I think he had 40 points and he was like, you can expect that on a night to night basis. And then he came out and had a dud of a game the next one. But it was just like, that was like the Gafford. Like Gafford was on Washington at that time. So I just think that the matchup really did play, a factor into this in terms of like what kind of looks he was able to get, what kind of looks Haliburton was able to get, Siakam, the whole thing. But, the Pacers just did a really good job of outpacing Dallas. I think this is a really good matchup for the Pacers. I really do. I just think that they're able to kind of go back and forth offensively. And I think that they have a more balanced scoring attack with who they have on the roster versus Dallas is so star heavy with Kyrie and Luka Doncic.
I'm not trying to discredit Dallas, but yeah, you're right. We've played them very well, at least the last 2 years. And it's like, I know that is the team that won the Western Conference. I don't fear the Dallas Mavericks. I really do not. They are a good team. For whatever reason why, Indiana has matched up very well. And that's a team that, hey, I wouldn't mind playing them again at any point because last year I remember it was the same type of big time performances. So just feels good. I think kind of goes to what we've said before that Indiana just gets up more for these type of games. You can't always have a Boston Celtics or a Dallas Mavericks on the schedule, but think about that. Indiana doesn't have many wins on the year. They beat the NBA champs, they beat the Western Conference champs. It's kind of interesting. They've lost to the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Orleans Pelicans without all of their top players. To me, that's an effort thing, and it shows that the talent is there for this Pacers team. They have what they need in-house, but yeah, you got to wake up. You got to bring it every single night. And I think that if they bring the same energy they brought against Dallas, they should be able to beat an Orlando team without their best player, but they can't view it that way. And that is the problem. It's like you just let up like 50 points to Paulo last time. He ain't going to be there next time. What's the excuse? You got to come out. You got to handle business.
Yeah, they just got absolutely spanked too by the Oklahoma City Thunder 102-86, and I think they lost the previous night to Memphis maybe or a couple nights ago. They haven't been playing well since Paulo went out. And I think Franz has still been kind of overcoming that sickness that he had when he left at halftime against the Pacers. So this is a team that you cannot overlook, right? Like I don't want to get to that yet because I still think there's some important stuff to talk about with this game. But this is an opportunity for the Pacers to get back to 500 and kind of like all the panic people have had early on, just kind of like put that to ease. But let's talk about Benedict Mathurin here for a second, Facci, because I'm looking at his shot chart and he only goes 1 of 4 from 3, but he ended up having a great shot chart because everything else he scored was exactly at the rim, inside the paint. Mathurin was driving with ease, and I loved in the fourth quarter. I had to tweet about it because he saw Luka Doncic was on him. Not once, but twice. Saw that he was on him once. gave him a little hezzy, drove right by him, got the and one. He missed a free throw,
I
but
know.
just a few plays later down, he sees Luka Doncic on him again. He jab steps, pulls up, hits a three over him, splashes nothing but net, walks down the court, and he's just smiling. You could tell he said something to Luka too. I mean, when he sees a superstar on him, he loves to rise to the challenge. And the best thing about Mathurin, Facci, he was so clutch in the fourth quarter. I went back and counted the points that he had. I might be off, but I think I'm right. He had 11 points in the Pacers' fourth quarter.
I believe that is right because it had been a quiet game earlier, and so I'm looking at it. So you are absolutely correct. He had 5 through 3 quarters, and I started saying to myself, like, man, this is kind of what happens when Mathurin goes in the starting lineup at times. Like, he kind of just like isn't featured as much, doesn't have those same opportunities. Had just 6 shot attempts through 3 quarters, and yeah, that fourth quarter, it's like we've now seen it time after time. He's come alive in some of these fourth quarters. He had a really good fourth quarter against New Orleans. He had a really good fourth quarter against, I believe it was Boston. Like he's had these moments against Detroit. It was another one where it's just he's really stepped up in the fourth quarter to be able to close games out. And I know people make a big deal out of who's starting and who isn't, but it's really a big deal of who's closing games. And I think that he's brought some of his best for last. That 3-pointer in Luka Doncic's face. If you listen to that back, it sounded like either like I tweeted out like a whip just cracked or just an absolute splash. It was that wet. And when he hit that, I went, wow, okay. And then he also had, in my opinion, what I felt like was like the nail in the coffin. He had a great layup towards the end of the game that I just felt like that was enough that put Indiana up. I think it was like maybe 7 at the time. And it was like, yep, that'll do it. And I just feel like we're starting to see little by little that like Mathurin is growing as a player, taking on these big opportunities late in the game and really coming through for the Pacers.
Yeah, and I thought that he looked pretty solid defensively. I mean, there was some times when he was matched up with Luka Doncic, and I thought he played pretty well on him. I mean, it's not an easy task, right? He only had 3 fouls in this game, which is great to see. You know, the Pacers as a team only committed 16 fouls. It felt like a lot more because that third quarter was so bad. But I mean, the fact that they only committed 16 fouls, I feel like that's an improvement from where they had been at because I feel like they'd been around like the 22, 24 range. So just playing a faster pace. And I felt like, you know, how are the Pacers going to go about defending this Mavericks team? I tweeted out earlier today what I thought they would do, especially with Nembhard back, right? He's got to draw Kyrie just because Kyrie is so fast and so quick, like, and you don't want to put anybody else on him. And I thought Haliburton would be getting Klay Thompson, and Klay Thompson, you know, he had some nice moments in this game as well, but went kind of quiet after his third quarter splash. So yeah, you're right. Mathurin, though, as an overall player, has just continued to get better and better. And the more minutes he's playing, the more he's producing. So, and I like how, what's up?
Now, just one quick thing on Mathurin before we move past him or anything. 3 straight games with 6 rebounds or more. He's really making an effort. We've heard at times, you know, Mathurin's not rebounding. He's watching the ball instead of going after. Like he's been really good this year, and he's going to be averaging a career high. I think after this game, it'll push him above 5 rebounds per game. 7 rebounds in this season, the second leading rebounder for the Pacers behind Turner. I just think that we're seeing a lot more effort, a lot of him buying into defense, buying into rebounding, the clutch baskets. Like this is the evolution of Benedict Mathurin.
Have you noticed, because I was going to bring this up before you brought up that great stat about the rebounds, which is great, by the way. Have you noticed a difference in his demeanor since he's been playing more minutes and has been getting more of an opportunity here? Because it feels like to me, he's playing freer than he had played probably the last 3 games before he started getting consistent minutes.
Yeah, I agree with it. I don't, whatever it is, I also feel like everybody always thinks that it's like Carlisle's too hard on him, like he's not the right coach for him. I feel like I don't know. I feel like Mathurin's responded. I really do feel like he's worked on the areas that he's been yanked in, like when he's made mistakes and he's gotten pulled out. I feel like he's made those changes. At times, I feel like we can tell when he's trying to get others involved. But I feel like lately, the last couple games, I feel like he's been playing, you know, his style of basketball. It doesn't look like he's just like stuck in a corner or trying to just like force the ball to get someone else involved. Like when there's been that opportunity, he's had that green light to put that shot up, and I feel like we're benefiting from that right now because there has been some great baskets down the stretch that I feel like is only a shot that maybe he could create for himself compared to some other people, and he's made defenses pay, and I do think he is playing more freely lately.
Yeah, I think it's partially because of necessity, right? Like the Pacers needed to play him because Nembhard was hurt, And then, of course, they already had Turner out against Celtics. So it's like, okay, we got to play him more. He ends up having a breakout game scoring wise. And then, against the Pelicans, he was pretty good in that game too. Had some moments early on. And then in the fourth, some in between stuff that would probably be a little bit better. But the team as a whole just struggled, in my opinion. So it wasn't like I'm going to like stare at him and be like, oh, glaring hole right there. I think maybe for him, he feels a little bit looser as a starter. I don't know. I feel like that's the same way with Nembhard. I feel like whenever Nembhard was coming off the bench, never really kind of seemed to get into his rhythm, but he does a better job as a starter getting into his rhythm. Whereas a guy like Obi Toppin, Ben Shepherd, TJ McConnell, those guys coming off the bench feel a little bit more comfortable in that role, and they're okay with doing that. But I just felt like the plays that Mathurin's going to the plays that Mathurin needs to continue to make that are going to keep him on the court even more are those plays where he ends up, I think it was in the third quarter, it might have been the fourth, but I think it was the third quarter. He goes up and grabs this massive rebound on the defensive side of things. I think Shepherd was right there in the vicinity, but he pulls it away from him and he throws it ahead, a bullet pass to Obi Toppin. Obi Toppin finishes in transition over a smaller defender. And it's just like, if you can go out there and get a defensive rebound and fight for it, and then make that kind of an outlet pass to move the ball up the court and play your style. Like, those are the kinds of examples that you're going to look back in the film and say, you know what? Great job, Mathurin, A+ on this play. And if he can have more of those plays, like, that's going to unlock everything else, because he wasn't forcing anything offensively. What do you have? 13 attempts tonight. So it wasn't like he was getting out of the flow of the offense to go out there and hunt for his own shots. But when he had the opportunities to do it, he took advantage of it. So that's where I'm really starting to see the maturity from Mathurin. He is really maturing before our eyes, and I think this is a great sign for his growth in year 3. And hey, this might be why he ends up being the breakout player for this team that they need to continue to raise that ceiling.
And this is why they were banking on that internal development, almost like treating him like a free agent acquisition or anything of that sort, to bring him to this team that had, gone on that conference finals run. Don't look now, but Benedict Mathurin is shooting 53% from the field and 40% from three. I mean, these are like big steps forward. Last year, and of course it's a small sample size, but last year he shot 44.6% from the field. This year, 53.3%. That's a huge jump. From three-point land, we've seen the growth. He shot 32% as a rookie, 37.4% last year, and 40% this year. I mean, that is some solid increases, especially coming off the injury. That's great growth. We talked about the rebounding. Right now, he's making more of an effort on the glass. That's been nice to see. I just feel like across the board, we are seeing that improvement, and the Pacers are benefiting from it. I mean, right now, this is a guy that, like, when you talk about ceiling-wise, he's got one of, if not, maybe the second highest ceilings on this team. We've talked about it. It's between him and Tyrese. It really is, and that's a pretty crazy statement to say, because one guy is all NBA right now, starting in the All-Star game, and one guy is still trying to, find out who he is in the league. But nights like this is where, hey, Ben Mathurin, he is someone special. He really is. And what we're seeing in the fourth quarter is great, because it felt like Tyrese has been that guy. Like, hey, Tyrese, get us a basket, bail us out at times. It's nice to know that Ben Mathurin could also be that guy who Tyrese can find for the shot, instead of having to force maybe a prayer three-pointer like against Philly when it went in, but we couldn't believe it or anything. And Tyrese has made magic happen, but it's nice to know there is someone else that can take that shot.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to like those 2 games against Philly and Orlando where he didn't play a whole lot. I think that those 2 games where Carlisle even said like they had a very like tough film watch there on that Philly game with how bad he played, and then he didn't get a lot in Orlando. I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call. I think that hard coaching, because he started out really good the first 2 games, right? Maybe had some rough games after that because he's in his head a little bit, feeling good about himself, and doesn't play the right way. I mean, I'm just guessing here, but it just seems like there was so much conversation after he didn't play a whole lot against Orlando. Ben Shepherd ends up getting in over him when Nesmith fouls out. It's just like people are just irate about it. And, we're kind of having these in the moment reactions a little bit. And I guarantee that I said stuff in the moment just because I'm just like trying to like reason with everybody and trying to hear every side, but also trying to have my own opinion as well. But, I'm just glad to see that he's playing well. And I will say this, you did say benefiting twice when you were talking about Mathurin's play. I just wondered, was that play on word on purpose, or was it just
Honestly, I caught myself the second time and I went, ooh, kind of like that. And like the first time, I definitely did not realize. The second time, I was like, they might have to make this into like a slogan or something, a t-shirt, something of the sort. But hey, it works. Mathurin, take it, do something with it. Get some good branding in.
yeah, all right. So just to kind of wrap things up here, just quickly, Andrew Nembhard returned to the lineup tonight. We talked about him just briefly, but didn't have any eye-popping stats, but I thought he played pretty well. I mean, just made some nice plays, got the Pacers started off with a nice three, had a nice two there in the second quarter, just like really kind of just filled the role as like that fifth role player with that starting five. And I really thought he played a pretty solid game all around. And, his stat line to me is never really going to jump off the page, but you know that he can do it at times. But I just felt like in this game to get his first game back after being out with that knee tendonitis for a couple of games, good to see him back on the court.
No, definitely. The Pacers look, they need Nembhard. They really do. And his role is not to be putting up 20 points per game or anything of the sort, but like he's going to play hard defense. He's going to give you good baskets. He's another, great passer on this team. I felt like this is for on a night like tonight, Nembhard, like like you said, nothing really flashed, but I felt like in the first quarter specifically, he was making Kyrie work for things. Kyrie was 2 of 8 in the first quarter. He eventually ended up figuring things out and shot just above 50%. You're never going to shut a player out or keep a player down like Kyrie Irving, but I felt like Nembhard made things tough on him. And I think that when you don't have Aaron Nesmith out there, like you need bodies to go around. It was great to have Andrew Nembhard back out there for the Pacers playing 28 minutes. It just makes that Pacers team that much more deep. And when you look at that starting five, I mean, that's sort of like the ideal starting five that everybody dreams of on paper of like, hey, here's our top five most talented players. It's great. It's great to see that lineup out there. I would be curious to see if the Pacers can, maybe they go on a run with this starting five. I mean, we've seen that at times. This is sometimes how change is made. I'm not saying that Aaron Nesmith's going to lose his starting spot by any means, but I'd like to see if what does happen if the Pacers win 3 straight games with this starting lineup or anything of the sort.
Yeah.
I'm here for it right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Tony East brought this up on his podcast before the Pelicans game and said that this five that started tonight probably had the best plus minus, I think, of the 5 lineups with Mathurin in it. So I might be completely wrong on that, but in terms of like what it was exactly, but that 5 had a better net rating than they did with Nesmith with Mathurin and Nembhard not in there. So I think that is a little bit interesting to me, even though it is a very small sample size for this season. But it's one of those things, like you said, if they go on a run with this group, how do you break that up? I don't think you can. So they've been struggling to try to get their footing. If they get their footing with this 5, you got to ride it out. So there could be a scenario here where Mathurin does earn that starting spot, but like we said, he'll have to earn it from Nesmith, and it won't just be handed to him. So quickly here, as we close things out, TJ McConnell thought he was awesome off the bench, brought a lot of energy, made some big buckets when the Pacers were getting a little bit tight there. And I thought Obi Toppin, I mean, this is a new role for him, playing the backup 5.
Yeah.
11.6 rebounds. I thought he played pretty well, shot the ball well. Don't love when he tries to bring the ball up the court, but when he's running down the court, he's got some really nice athleticism, had a really nice up and under drive in the second quarter, I believe it was. So he's just a guy that when you watch him play, you know that what you're getting, right? You know what you're getting with Obi Top, you know what you're getting with TJ McConnell, but it's nice to see them be consistent and bring that energy off the bench. So nothing really else to say. I thought Jarris and Shep had fine games. Nothing that really stood out, but like some good moments there from both of them. And they got to get the double figures, man. What are they doing?
I know. One thing I don't want to stir the pot a little bit, but one thing that's making its run on my timeline is Bilal Coulibaly.
Let's just pump the brakes.
It's not great right now, and I don't want this to become a thing. Bilal Coulibaly is balling out right now. It's a completely different scenario. The Wizards have nothing to play for at all, but Coulibaly's doing it on both sides of the ball.
He's good.
Now. He is playing really good defense, and he is averaging 19.4 points per game on 60% from the field, and it's starting to be like each game I look and I see like Jarris isn't playing that much. It's like a little drip of sweat starts to come down my head of just like, oh man. And look, totally different roles, but yeah, Coulibaly is a good player right now, and I think for Jarris Walker, it's still that like like you said before, hey, could he play all 82 games or be in the rotation? Like, he's making those appearances, not playing many minutes in them, but he is steadily in the rotation, and that is definitely a step forward from what we saw last year. 14
Well, he's
minutes
getting
tonight.
better. He's getting
He
better
is.
as a player.
He is.
But
He
let's just
absolutely
go back to the draft just real quick for a second since you brought us there. Two things I want to say. Number one, when the Pacers drafted Jarris Walker, who was their starting power forward at that moment? Jalen Smith or
is.
Aaron Neesmith. They were small. They didn't have a power forward. They didn't have Obi Toppin yet, and they didn't have
Mhm.
Pascal Siakam yet. So that does
Yep.
change things
They do
and how
change.
they viewed him and his playing time.
Totally.
And then number two, people got mad at me when I posted it, but I put the side by side of Bilal Coulibaly in the Pacers hat and Kawhi Leonard in the Pacers hat, and people were like, "Don't do this crap right now. Jarris Walker is going to be great." I'm like, "Okay, I hope he is," but I'm just telling you,
Yes.
it's always that random guy that you probably just don't really think about because he's not a big sexy name, right? Like Kawhi Leonard was a good player in college, but I don't think anybody was like, "Oh, who's this massive game changer that's going to be a Finals MVP?" Nobody saw that happening. So,
It did not.
Bilal Coulibaly having a great sophomore breakout season. Happy for him. I know you're happy for him with your Washington
Totally.
Wizards.
It's
I mean,
it's
you're the
it's
one that
just
brought him
picking.
up. It wasn't me that was watching all the stats
I
again. You're
know.
the one keeping up with it.
Hey, look, it's kind of hard. It's like once you click on one thing, all of a sudden the timeline changes, and now I'm just getting like Bilal Coulibaly highlights on the timeline, and I'm like, oh man, and look, I understand the Kawhi Leonard type of draft day thing. Like, I don't think the Pacers ever even had I can't say they never had a thought about drafting him, but it never seemed serious at any
Mhm.
point. So it's not like the Pacers passed him up. I don't think he was ever in the running, and I think that the fit for what Washington being like a tanking team was going to be like, hey, they're going to give him way more of an opportunity. But I think for Jarris Walker, he is getting better. He is consistently playing. I think that this is almost like we've said before. This is basically like his rookie season where Koulibaly got to play it out freely last year and nobody cared if the team won, lost, if he messed up or anything, where that's not the same type of like he doesn't have the same type of long leash basically like Jarris Walker does not have that type of leash that Bilal Koulibaly has.
Absolutely. And I want to just change this real quick because I feel bad I missed this earlier.
What do you got?
When we talked about Tyrese Haliburton, we talked about how he had 8 made twos. He had 0 missed twos. He went 8 for 8 inside the arc tonight. I mean, I overlooked it when we were talking about it, but that just kind of shows you how special he can be inside the paint and how much that can
Yeah,
open up his game. I don't want to elaborate any more on that. I'm just going to
great
leave it at
point.
that. But we do need to close things out here, Facci, with our player awards. And I think our game awards, I should say. We got our Mel Daniels MVP. We've got our Feisty Foster player of the game. And we've also got our Reggie Miller clutch player of the game. So I'm curious, MVP of the game, I feel like it has to be number 33.
Yeah, I think you give it a Turner. I think this is just such a breakout performance, and I feel like
He got
he
11
just
rebounds. You're not going to see that very often.
no, you got to give it a Turner. I felt like give Turner the MVP for like a feisty Foster. Like I think Tyrese Haliburton was just had a great game. It's like you could argue the feisty part of it, but it also kind of feels wrong not giving Turner any. I mean, giving Haliburton any type of recognition when
I
he
don't know
didn't
if he
have his
deserves the
best.
Feisty.
I mean, he had his best game, and I think you got to give him credit for like he was feisty in terms of not settling for threes. He got into the paint, he got into the lanes, like things like that is like that's what you wanted to see. He's battling on defense. Like I think Halliburton deserves some recognition here. And then while I'm still just going at it, if we want to say the Reggie Miller clutch, I mean Mathurin was really
Yep.
clutch in the fourth quarter. I think that's how I would go in terms of the awards. Do you see it any differently?
I think that you're right on the Mel Daniels MVP award, and I think you're right on the Mathurin Clutch Player of the Award, our first one of the season. But I do think for the Feisty Foster, the all hustle player,
Yeah.
it's hard for me not to look at TJ McConnell. I mean, TJ McConnell was so good in this game off the
Lord.
bench.
I mean, he is the feisty one. So, yeah, totally. You can always give it to McConnell. He's always going to be, scrapping, doing everything he could possibly do to just, be able to give the Pacers an advantage. And that's something that you never have to worry about, hustle or heart or anything like that from TJ McConnell. So, very deserving.
Yeah, I mean, Halliburton did have, right, 2 steals and a block in this game.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
He's
he
been a
had
better
some
shot
really,
blocker this year. He
yeah.
has. Early on in the season, he was definitely having some moments from a shot blocking standpoint. So that was good to see. First game of the season, he had 2 shot. Okay, so it hasn't been a lot of, blocks by any means, but I've definitely seen him contesting shots. I feel like a lot more, and it's just good to see. Step forward defensively.
Yeah, maybe we should come up with another award for this, for our game stuff, like the breakout player of the game. Something like that could maybe fit the bill a little bit more, because when I think of Haliburton, I don't think of like a feisty player. Like
I don't either. Like I don't. Like I'm definitely
yeah.
not gonna make
Maybe
it
we
seem
could just
like
give out Mel Daniels MVPs to him in
Yeah,
turn.
I think that would have been more fitting
Let's do
because
that.
I
There's
felt
no
like
rules here.
yeah, Halliburton and Turner were both worthy of being game MVPs, depending on how you look at it. So I think they're deserving of sharing the award.
Okay, let's do that. We'll call them co-MVPs, and I'll give McConnell the feisty Foster player of the game. So that works out. So all 4 players get recognition here. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying there's co-MVPs. We've seen that happen in professional sports before. So
Yeah.
we're not going to keep that from happening on this game, because both were massively important to the Pacers having success and winning this game. So with that being said, Facci, we did go a little bit lengthy tonight. It is a late night. If you're listening to this, you're probably, also checking the polls to see what's going on voting wise, as people are going to cast their votes tomorrow if they haven't already, and we'll see how that all plays out. But no Pacers basketball on Tuesday. They'll be back Wednesday against the Orlando Magic. Actually, there's no NBA games tomorrow on Tuesday, so tune into CNN, Fox News, wherever you get your MSNBC, like check out all of those to keep up with who is going to win the election, and maybe you'll find out, maybe you won't. But we know this: the Pacers got a victory, and that's all that matters to us. The Pacers are back on the winning track. So Facci, if you're glad the Pacers are playing better basketball and had a breakout win against the Dallas Mavericks, hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go Pacers.